Here's the instructional video for the snow angel technique on the floor. Okay, as we get ready to start this technique called the snow angel, what I really want you to understand is the importance between the problem and the symptom. And oftentimes in healthcare, as good as healthcare is, our culture has really gotten stuck on just chasing after the symptoms. And that would be very similar to is if you went into the basement and you have your basement flooded with water and you just start bailing water out of your basement, but you don't look for where the leak or the rupture is coming from in your pipes, and you just keep trying to bail the water, you're essentially never going to be able to get that basement dried out. So we want to do the same thing. We want to be able to really help you find the problem of what's going on within the structure and not just look at the symptom. So when we look at this snow angel technique, one of the biggest things that we have to do when we're approaching the shoulder girdle is that there's a lot of people who have all sorts of shoulder issues, rotator cuff issues, in and around the top of the shoulder, and a lot of that can really be coming from what's happening on the front side of the body and below that shoulder as well. So what happens with a lot of people as they drive a lot, they're texting, they're on their computers, they're at work all day long, this shoulder girdle starts to round forward and everything starts to collapse forward this way. And what that does is that pulls all of this tissue down in the front, and it pulls it to the inside too much. And then what happens is that that tissue gets stuck in those positions because that fascial tissue starts to get sticky and it really starts to glue together. And then the muscle fibers can even get into a place where they think that they should stay locked in that locked short position. So then what happens on the back side of the body is this backside tissue of the shoulder girdle where the scapula are start to migrate too wide. They start to shift away from each other as the front of the body rounds. And now there's a tremendous amount of tug-of-war happening between the front and the back side of the body. So what we're going to see happen is that as we change the front side, if we can get lift and space on the front side of the body, it's going to actually allow the back side of the body to soften and come to more of a neutral place. And so as we transition into that element, we're going to use our snow angel technique to be able to start that process. So we're going to have Jenna just go ahead and lower herself onto the roller. And a really safe way to get there is you just lower yourself onto your hands and knees, and then you can just put your pelvis on the roller. And from there, all she's going to do is just going to lower herself down onto the roller. And you're always going to keep in mind that if it's difficult for you to get on the floor, we always have either a seated or a standing variation or a version of this same technique that you can do. And I want you to just go right to that technique if getting on the floor is going to be difficult and or if it's going to increase pain for you. So now that we have Jenna in this position, we really are going to look at and really remember from our connected tissue anatomy that all of this tissue is completely connected. So even though that we have different muscles within the body, they all completely knit together and they're all connected. So as Jenna's laying here on the roller, one of the benefits that's going to start happening is that just the mere fact that she's laying on the roller, it already starts to stretch and open the chest. And then it also starts to bring those shoulder blades and those scapula back towards the middle of the back where they're supposed to be. Remember, when this tissue gets tight in the front, it pulls your scapula or your shoulder blades away from the spine, and that puts a lot of stress and sends a lot of danger signals to your brain that something is wrong and can really facilitate that unique neural pain signature that you have going. So as she's laying here, this is already going to start to stretch and open, and the motion that we're going to work with is just going to be a gentle snow angel, or if you live in Florida like we do, you're going to be calling them sand angels. So from here, Jenna's going to just let her arms lay on the floor. A key piece to this is we want to make sure that her feet and her knees are nice and relaxed. If she tries to squeeze the knees and the feet together, what that's going to do is that's going to make her more unstable on the roller, and then it's going to tighten up that shoulder girdle because her abs and her ribs are contracting, trying to keep her from rolling off or falling off the roller. So it's going to be important that she keeps some space between her feet and she keeps her knees nice and relaxed. Once we know that she's comfortable and stable on the roller, we're going to have her start by just taking a nice soft breath in. As she exhales, she's just going to let everything soften and let go. And what I like to have my clients think of while they're doing this is that I want them to think about a neon sign with a dimmer switch. And the dimmer switch is turned all the way on. So the lights are all the way up and it's bright and it's noisy. I can hear them buzzing. And that's kind of what happens within our connective tissues in the fascial system, is that they're just holding and doing more work than what they should. So as you exhale and you soften, just think about that dimmer switch turning down. So now it's only at a 1 or a 2 instead of at a 9 or a 10. So now that we have the shoulder girdle softening, the spine is softening, this is actually going to really help soften the upper part of the shoulders, the lower part of the shoulders. We can have her go through the motion. So all Jenna's going to do is she's just going to go through this nice, comfortable, using our sticker slow speed snow angel motion, and she's going to go ahead and start moving her wings. Now, as she's doing this, what this is doing is this is starting to stretch and open all of this tissue on the front and the bottom side of this shoulder girdle, which is going to help us have a lot of change happening in the top and the back side of the shoulder girdle, where so many people feel a lot of discomfort. The other thing that happens with this shoulder girdle, and she's going to continue to come back down nice and easy, and she can go maybe just a little bit faster than that, so it's not too slow or too much of a strain on that shoulder girdle, is that the big bulky muscles become overbearing and the small muscles lose their ability to contract because they can't fight against the big bulky muscles, so they just kind of shut off and they stop working. Otherwise they feel like they're going to tear, or they actually do tear. So as Jenna continues her snow angels, a couple of things that we would want to pay attention to is if at any point in this motion she gets to a point where it's catching or it feels like it's getting stuck, I'm going to have her just lift that arm up a little bit around that catch, and then she's just going to let it lower back down. So as she's going through that motion, she can let it come forward of that catch, and then she can let it back down as she gets around it. We call that getting around your catches and your bumps. And so if you need to do that on the way down as well, that's totally acceptable. Ultimately, what we're trying to teach your brain is that it has the ability to be able to move the way that it needs to comfortably to deal with any stresses that are happening within it. The other thing that we want to make sure is that she's not forcing her arms down onto the ground. If all of this tissue is really tight, it's going to keep that arm lifted off of the ground, and that's totally okay, because what will happen over the next few weeks as you continue to implement this into your practices is that it's going to just soften and open and soften and open, and after 2 or 3 weeks you're going to see an arm that might have been way off the floor now effortlessly is rubbing against and articulating against the floor as she does this motion. The other thing to pay attention to is that there's almost always a difference between your left side and your right side. For example, let's say Jenna has in the past had some kind of shoulder injury where there's been some scar tissue development, or it's different than what it used to be. As she's doing this snow angel, maybe her right side is a little higher than her left, and that's totally okay. What we don't want you to do is we don't want you to try to force them to be in exactly the same position if they're just not ready to be there. So again, we're working within what your goals are and what your body can do, and not just saying there's an exact cookie cutter mold that everybody has to be doing exactly the same thing. Because the truth is, just like a snowflake, everybody's body is completely different. So we would have Jenna do that about 5 or 6 times, and after 5 or 6 snow angels, we're going to transition into the next variation of that. So the next piece to that is going to be, we're going to focus more on one side. So let's say she's going to pick her left side. What she's going to do with her right arm is that she can do 2 things. She can either leave the arm on her belly if she wants, or she can just let the arm rest down by her side. It doesn't matter which one, whichever one is more comfortable. So now as she's doing this, now that the right side isn't stretching as well, when you work both sides bilaterally or at the same time, it pulls the sheet tight all the way across together, which is good in the very beginning to get this warmed up. Now that I'm getting a little bit more range, what I want to do is if I let one side relax, it softens that fabric and it allows me to get a little more stretch out of one side at a time once I've gotten everything kind of warmed up. And so what a lot of people will notice is that now maybe their arm wasn't quite touching the floor, or their hand wasn't touching the floor when they were doing them together, and now they're seeing that happening when they're doing one side at a time. So she would do 4 or 5 on her left side, and then she would switch her arms, and then she would do 4 or 5 on her right side. So after doing them one side at a time, we're going to come into one of my favorites, which is, we call it you're going to alternate your wings. So you're going to flap your wings at a little bit different of a pace. So what we're going to have Jenna do now is she's going to start with one arm up and one arm down. And now what she's going to do is she's still going to use that slow, gentle speed, is that she's going to go through that same motion, but she's going to alternate one arm going up and one arm going down. And what this is going to do for the shoulder girdle is, yes, while we're stretching the front side of the body, the beautiful part to this particular technique is we're actually getting a twofer. We're getting two techniques accomplished at the same time. So on the back side of the body, where the scapula or your shoulder blades are rubbing against the roller, is that as she's doing this motion, one scapula is turning up, one scapula is turning down, so they're going alternating from each other. And what that's going to do is that's going to get the tissues to fire and contract and relax in different ways, which ultimately can help the nervous system feel safe, and then it starts to change how hard things are contracting to accomplish those particular tasks. And it doesn't allow the brain to get used to what we're doing, so things are constantly being changed, which is a really great thing. So she would do that, same thing, 4 to 5 times. So you can see as you do each of these 4 or 5 times, it really adds up to quite a few repetitions of what we're doing. So it might not feel like a lot as we're doing it because it's so effortless and it's so simple, but it really does add up over just a few minute time period. So now we're going to go to the last phase of this particular technique. So what we're going to do with this is she is going to use, if she's going to snow angel with her left arm, she is actually going to use the finger pads of her right arm or of her right hand, not the fingertips. And we're actually going to work with a little bit of self-care. Some people call it self-myofascial work. Other people call it self-massage. It really is kind of the same thing. So what Jenna's going to do is she's going to take her finger pads and she's going to place them on her sternum right in the very, very middle, but then she's going to let them come just a little bit out into the muscle on her left side, into the pectoralis muscle. So where this muscle attaches onto your rib cage, there's these areas called the Golgi tendon organs that tell the muscle how hard to contract in case it's nervous that something is going to happen. And so what she's going to do is that she's just going to massage and do some self-fascial work in and around that area by doing 4 or 5 slow, small circles. After 4 or 5, she's going to move that hand up a bit more, and again, she's just a little bit off of the very middle, right into still on her sternum, and then the arm is going to come up a little bit higher into another spot where she's feeling a bit of a stretch, and then she's going to do 4 or 5 small circles, and then she's going to continue to do that in 3 or 4 different spots as she works her way up along the sternum, and then the arm continues to come up. And we're going to see that really get this pectoralis major start to soften, and it's really going to allow that arm to open up, and it's going to allow that chest and rib cage to open up, so you have more mobility and functionality out of that shoulder girdle. So again, that order of doing both arms at the same time and then doing one arm at a time if you need to. And if you're having any kind of pain or significant catches, you could even do one arm first before you do the bilateral, whatever your body needs to be able to do that comfortably. Then you're going to transition into your alternating wings, and then you're going to do that self-work while you're doing your snow angel. And that order and that protocol or that recipe is going to be a very successful way to really start to open up the front of this shoulder girdle so the back of the shoulder girdle can start to settle down and come into a much more neutral, relaxed position. So you're going to have better balance, coordination, better endurance, and ultimately as those things start improving, your pain levels are definitely going to decrease and shift and go away.